This video is on Handy's 4 classes of culture, and it's for AQA, A2 Business Studies, Unit 10, and it's in line with organisational culture. So I've already done a video on that, and I've also done a video on Hofstede's cultural dimensions. This is the final video. So it's based on the basis of power and influence in an organisation and what motivates people, how people think and learn, and how change should occur. So the first one that I'm going to look at, the first class, is called Polyculture. Now, Polyculture is definitely a culture which is appropriate for a centralised hierarchy, because the management would have similar beliefs to this culture, and they'd want to embed this type of culture within their hierarchy. So it means that cultural belief, that control should be exerted by the centre of the hierarchy. Only a few should have the power, and those should be the most senior. They believe that the culture will allow for swift decision making. The management style, probably one that's much more autocratic, perhaps paternalistic, but I'll definitely associate it with an autocratic approach, that they believe that they are best, they know what they're doing, and they need that really strict control over the firm. So therefore, if we're relating it to Tallenbauer and Smith's theory, it'd be much more management-centred, definitely a tell type of approach. McGregor's X and Y, well, it'd be most appropriate for the Theory X worker. Remember, the Theory X worker is the one that doesn't want the additional responsibility of delegation or empowerment. They're at work for an income. They're not maybe aspirational, ambitious, and it'd be much easier for them if control and instructions and decisions were kind of just passed down, well, in terms of responsibilities anyway, and the decision making they would not want, but the instructions they'd want just to be told exactly what to do. And again, if we're thinking about Hofstede's power distance, it'd be probably more appropriate for countries which have high power distance. Again, remember, with that type of culture, they believe in the importance of having that power. They believe, so this is subordinates as well. Subordinates would much rather have a leader to look up to, and they respect authority, and they'd rather have someone in a senior position actually making the decisions, because the subordinates believe that they're in the best position to do so. The next structure that we're going to look at, the next culture, is going to be role culture. And again, in terms of hierarchy, it's much more based on a tall hierarchy, because of the belief that a business should be structured and it should be rigid. People have specific roles, and those roles determine the power you have within an organisation. So in terms of a tall hierarchy, it has that lots of layers of management, and management have specific roles. So I believe it would be much more fitting for a tall type of hierarchy. And again, for Tallenbauer and Smith, it'd be definitely management centred. For Hofstede's power distance, I agree again with the last point. It's very similar in terms of there would probably be quite a high power distance, because again, the need for structure and rigid, and there's specific senior roles. And in terms of, now this is a different theory that I've brought in terms of Grainer's model of growth, which was of course in Unit 9. Now, I'm not saying that this type of culture is destined to fail. I'm not saying that at all. But if it was to fail, one of the crisis points it'd be most likely to experience compared to the other structures is probably the bureaucratic red tape crisis, because of the amount of layers and the cultural belief that specific managers should have responsibility for certain tasks. There's probably going to be much more inefficiency, and the decision making would probably be quite slow, because it'd have to go through all those different roles, and therefore it'd be, like I said before, bureaucratic. The third one is a task culture. Now, this is a much more collaborative culture with the need for teamwork for success. Power derives from the expertise amongst the team, and every individual has a role to play. In terms of hierarchy, it's much more suitable for a matrix structure, which obviously with specialists from a range of functional areas working together. In terms of, again, Herzberg to factor theory and motivational theory, you could say it's associated with a Herzberg motivator. And the reason being is because the need for teamwork and empowerment, and more non-financial incentives would be more motivational within this aspect. In terms of management style and Tallenbaum and Smith, you would probably argue that the need for creativity is crucial, so therefore a democratic or laissez-faire approach would be key, and make it much more subordinate centred to try and get the best out of these individuals. Remember, in this task culture, they should be theory wire workers. They should be the ones who are really trying to. They're obviously they're task orientated, and they want to perform. They want to get the best out of this project, and therefore they're much more, I suppose, motivated by the achievement of this project. Instead of Hofstede's individualism dimension, I would say it would have a very low score because it would be much more a collectivist type of culture. So if a country had a low individualism score, then you'd probably argue that this task culture would be more appropriate for organisations within that country. Now, the one thing I will say is with this culture, you have to be careful that there's not a conflict of culture, because remember, in terms of a matrix structure, that's almost like a structure within a structure. So you could have the original hierarchy, but then the creation of this new one based on a set project. Now, you just have to be careful that one doesn't take priority over the other. And what you'd probably find is the task culture would take priority because of the need for success from the team. And if you felt like you were maybe not prioritising the task, you were letting your teammates down, and that would be the type of culture that you'd be looking at. The final one is a person culture. No, a person culture is a very, very ambitious culture. Every worker believing that they're the reason for the success of the firm, and the firm depends on them, their specialist skills. So you'd expect this culture in high-skilled industries. I've given the example of law, but in terms of looking at management styles and McGregor X and Y, there'd definitely be a theory Y style of worker, because they'd be really, really self-driven, self-determined. They would want to perform because of that just showing off their success and showing the rest of the business, this is what I'm capable of, this is what I achieved. In terms of Hofstede's individualism, it'd probably receive a high score, so it'd be more suited for a country, of course, with a high individualism score, because they're looking out for themselves, they're looking out for what they can achieve and what they can do, and the job comes first.